raises some interesting questions like, does globalization affect the environment? And if so, how does it? So today, we will be talking about China, the Kyoto Protocol, environmental movement, and e-waste. Over to you, Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca. China imports and exports more than any other country in the world, yet no one gives a second thought as to how the factories affect the environment. Why, just last week, Beijing announced an air apocalypse on the city of Harbin. Schools and the airport were shut down and most traffic came to a halt. Thick fog enveloped the whole city, making it impossible to see the sun. People were advised to remain in their homes. Now, even Japan and South Korea are worried about the pollution spreading their way. Now I ask you, is it worth risking the lives of the 11 million people living in Harbin, or the numerous others living across Asia, just so that you can have those Walmart shoes for $10? Well, is it? Now, over to the ever-enthusiastic Colton.
Most of the time, when the words globalization and environment are used in the same sentence, there is a negative connotation. This can be from the thought of deforestation, pollution, and global warming. However, globalization has done some great things for the environment. One of those is the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol is an international agreement linked to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This agreement makes participating countries commit to meeting emissions reduction targets. This environment treaty was negotiated in December 1997 and came into force on February 16, 2005. The Kyoto Protocol. What?
It's so dry. Have some more enthusiasm. I'm falling asleep.
The Kyoto Protocol states that industrialized countries will reduce their collective emission of greenhouse gases by 5.2% compared to the year of 1990. The overall goal of the total is for each country to reduce 6 of the greenhouse gases. They are able to do this by switching to renewable energy, creating efficiency standards, and also replanting forests that have been cut down. Originally, all the United Nations members and the European Union were a part of this treaty. However, the United States has no intention to ratify the treaty and meet its target goals. In 2011, Canada formally withdrew from the Kyoto Agreement, saying that this decision would save the federal government $14 billion in penalties. Other than these countries that will not be meeting their targets, other developed nations of this treaty have been successful in reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. Because of globalization, nations from across the world have taken part in the Kyoto Protocol to help protect and sustain the environment.
So what's up with the Kyoto Protocol? This international environment treaty was originally created to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from industrialized countries in order to slow global warming. The question, though, is just how effective has this agreement been? Originally, 40 industrialized nations signed this treaty and committed to decreasing their greenhouse gases. So how are these nations doing with meeting their targets? 16 nations are on target to meet their obligations. Some of these countries are France, Greece, and the United Kingdom. 20 countries are off course with their obligations, and if they do not fulfill them, they must pay a penalty. Canada has dropped out of the Kyoto Protocol completely because there is no possible way of reaching their target emission levels, which would result in $14 billion in penalties. Out of the 196 countries in the world, only 40 of them are legally responsible for meeting their emission targets. Did you know that China and India are not a part of those 40 countries? China is the most polluted country in the world. How has this happened, you may be wondering? Well, one of the biggest factors is globalization. China's high economic growth rate has been a huge contribution to pollution, with many Western companies going over to China to have their products manufactured for rock-bottom prices compared to having them made in Western countries. The World Bank found that 20 of the world's 30 most polluted cities are in China. It was also found that only 1% of the air in China's cities would be safe by the European Union standards. By now, you are probably asking yourself why the biggest polluter in the world is not held accountable in an international environment treaty put forth by the United Nations. Well, China is a developing nation. Therefore, they did not have to sign the agreement. All developing nations are categorized into one group, and it is thought that they may not have the technology or financial power to reduce their emissions like developed countries. In the end, when you look at the Kyoto Protocol, it has not achieved a 5% reduction in greenhouse gases worldwide. However, what the Kyoto Protocol has done is establish the founding blocks for future environment treaties that will hold all the countries in the world accountable for the pollution that they have created. In the future, globalization will play an even larger role, since each day the world's nations become more interdependent on one another.
Environmental movement can simply be defined as a social and political movement mainly concerning with the conservation of environment, as well as improving the state of environment. It covers broad and different areas of institutional oppression. Such oppression may include consumptions of ecosystems and natural resources into waste. It also includes pollution of air and water, weak infrastructure, exposure of organic life to toxic, and several other focuses. The beginning of modern environmental movement can be dated back to attempts in the 19th century Europe and North America to exhibit the cost of environmental negligence, especially disease and widespread air as well as water pollution. On June 30th, 1948, Congress passed the first piece of legislation to lay down federal regulation of water quality, the Federal Water Pollution Control Act. This act, known as the FWPCA, will go through amendments in 1956, 65, and 72 to broaden the government's authority in water pollution control.
Rich countries are using the process of globalization to send e-waste to the poor countries of the world. The high demand for the latest cell phones, TVs, and computers is leaving more electronic waste than what the world knows how to deal with. These discarded devices are full of toxins such as lead and mercury. Instead of being properly recycled, these products are being dumped in developing countries such as Ghana. An investigation into e-waste in Ghana showed that some of the waste was being transported illegally to places like Ghana from Europe and the United States. Unprotected workers, mainly children, take apart the devices in search of any metals that can be sold. The remaining waste is burned or left there. Ghana is the world's largest digital dumping grounds. The West dumps hundreds of millions of tons of devices there each year. The bodies of water in Ghana are known as the most polluted lakes in the world. The process of globalization is contributing to the environmental problems that the world is facing.
Hey Colton,
Yeah?
what are you doing?
Hiding?
Hiding from what?
Hiding from globalization.
Look at those computers.